Tonight's video may well be the greatest telescope mount review video on the planet, and that is because I'm not going to be reviewing just one mount. I'm going to be reviewing 7 telescope mounts at the same time under the exact same conditions with precisely the same guiding equipment. This video has taken months of preparation to do, and I know it's going to be worth it because I'm going to be providing the astrophotography community with conclusive evidence on what each of these mounts are capable of doing from a relatively light polluted garden like this under the exact same conditions at the same time. So let's find out what is the best pound for pound telescope mount on the market. I'm Damon Scotting and this is Astronomical. So the first thing I want to talk about in this video is conducting a fair test. Now, when I was at university, we spent the vast majority of our lab sessions discussing what could have possibly went wrong and what the reasons were for it. What discrepancies did we have in our tests? Now, when I do my telescope mount reviews on YouTube, I typically review one at a time and go into detail about it, provide some guiding results, and that's it. I then might make another video a couple months down the line, reviewing another telescope mount, and I'll get another set of guiding results, but these can't be compared, because they weren't conducted under the exact same fair conditions. In fact, even if I was to start guiding with this telescope right here and then switch out the mount and put another one on and start guiding again, these results also wouldn't be fair. All it takes is a very thin layer of clouds to pass in front of our target and all of a sudden our results are invalid. So I've come up with a big brain idea to conduct this huge telescope mount test where I'm comparing up to 4 telescope mounts at the exact same time using precisely the same guiding gear pointed at the same target. So very quickly then, before we get started, here are the 4 most important key points about the test I'm going to be doing today. Number 1. Every single telescope is using a 50mm guide scope that I bought from AliExpress, partnered with a ZWO ASI 120 monochrome guiding camera. All of them are using that, partnered up with an ASI Air. That's fair. As you can see down in front of me, I have 4 different smart devices that are each displaying the ASI Air app. They are showing me the guiding results live as we speak. I'm screen recording from every single one of them so that you can see exactly what I'm seeing on the tablets, so it's balanced across the board. Number 2 is I'm going to be pointing them at the exact same target for 15 minutes. I'm going to be looking at 4 different targets throughout the course of tonight and comparing the results achieved from each of them. Number 3, I haven't really put too much thought into the payloads that I should be putting onto each of these telescope mounts. I've basically just put on whatever telescopes I have spare and then the guide scope on top of them. So yes, you can make the argument that this mount would perform differently if it was maxed out at its payload, but I don't have the means to max out every single one of these telescope mounts. And number 4, as you can see from a lot of the telescopes, some of them don't have cameras mounted to them, and that's because I didn't feel it was necessary, because I'm not going to waste time imaging targets. I'm just going to focus on guiding. I am going to be splitting today's video up into 2 different parts because I can only review 4 different mounts at the exact same time. I have 7 mounts to review in total, which works out nicely because I want to be using one mount throughout both tests to provide a fair reference point, a baseline for what to expect. And the mount I'm going to be using for this is the AM5N. It is without a doubt one of the most popular strainwave mounts in the entire planet. It's basically the industry leading standard in what to purchase as an amateur astrophotographer and get incredible results from, but unfortunately it costs over £2,000. So today's video is trying to find out if we can find a cheaper alternative. Right, so before we get started, let's take a look at the telescope mounts that I'm going to be reviewing in today's video. So first up, we have the cheapest of the bunch, the Teseek 11 mount. I have just done a full review on this mount, so be sure to check that out in the description down below. Our next mount is the Clearsky ST25 Mini. It is also very small and supposedly capable of payloads up to 20 kilograms. Oof. Could this Teseek 17 mount be the answer to all of our prayers? It's a budget-friendly mount that packs a punch and is available for under £500 before taxes and shipping. Then we have one of my favourite mounts of the last few years, the Juwei 14. It's very well made, durable, and has travelled with me a lot over the last 6 months. I'm also a very big fan of the Swiss Army knife of strainwave mounts, the EM31 Pro. This is a strong rival to the AM5N, albeit with a lot more compatible accessories. Speaking of which, here it is, arguably the most popular strainwave mount series in history. It is also the only mount featured today that is available via UK and US retailers. And finally, the telescope mount equivalent of a unicorn. This colossal beast of a mount seems too good to be true. It ticks all of my boxes and even features additional USB and DC power ports. How cool is that? So we do have a huge variance in the mounts I'm going to be reviewing. We have a £299 mount and we also have a £2,199 mount. My biggest justification for making this video is that I love these third-party AliExpress mounts because they're so affordable. Astrophotography is an amazing hobby. I want more people to get into it, but even to get started with the most basic equipment costs an absolute fortune, which is why I'm very keen on finding something that is the solution to all of our problems. I don't want the go-to answer for what is the best beginner telescope mount to be a £2,199 AM5N telescope mount. That's not okay. That basically rules out 99.999% of the population from taking an interest in this hobby. Instead, I want to be telling people, hey, check out this £299 telescope mount. Yes, it only carries payloads up to 5 kg, but it still provides you very similar results to this 2K mount. That's my hope. I have reviewed all of these telescope mounts before individually, but now I want to do them at the same time so I have fair results and I can determine once and for all what is the best pound for pound telescope mount on the market. So the first part is going to be reviewing the smaller mounts, and the second part is going to be reviewing the very heavy mounts, including the biggest telescope mount that I've ever purchased before. Yeah, that one will be really special. Right, so let's get stuck in with the smaller mounts and see how they fare. So right now they're all looking at the Andromeda galaxy and guiding at the exact same time, and you can see the results displayed down here below. I'm going to speed these up a little bit. Every single one of them is guiding at 1 second long exposures, and yeah, all in all they're producing some very good results. But perhaps most surprisingly, out of these 4 telescope mounts, the one that seems to be faring the best is the Teseek 11. Yeah, not too sure what to think about that. So the number we're going to be focusing on throughout this video is the total RMS value. Much like in golf, the smallest score wins. The higher this number is, the more our mount is having to correct its position to remain focused on our target. This means our chances of having pinpoint stars are going to reduce, especially if this value exceeds something like 2.00, which I've already noticed the Juwei 14 and the AM5N mount do. I am going to be testing these mounts out on 4 different targets, but for our first test, none of them have fared particularly well on the Andromeda galaxy, excluding the Teseek 11, which has passed with flying colours somehow. In fact, there was even a point during our observations where it was guiding at less than 0.4 RMS, which is the last thing I expected from such a lightweight and flimsy mount. Now, when I was filming this video, the goal was to analyse the log graphs recorded throughout these observations later on, but for some very frustrating reason, only the ASI Air Plus recorded this data, while the ASI Air Mini recorded absolutely nothing. So instead, I've had to write a script that will analyse each individual frame of my screen recordings to determine what the total RMS value was over the course of these observations. It will then calculate the average at the end, give me a good idea as to how the mount's guiding was overall. And in the case of the Teseek 11, it really doesn't get much better than that. Seriously, should we just call it there? That is flawless. This is just the first test of many that I'll be doing during the course of this video, and I figured now would be a really good time to let you know about my new channel, The Telescope Man, where I'll be posting a much longer version of this video where I dive into a lot more of the nitty-gritty details and explore the data in more depth, something my fellow nerds will really enjoy. I also talk a lot more about the control variables and how this was a fair test, but what could have been done to make it even fairer. Make sure you subscribe to my new channel, The Telescope Man, if you love astrophotography content, and to give you an idea of what to expect, here's a quick teaser. Hello, I'm the Telescope Man and I'm on a mission to review every single telescope on our planet. My goal is to show you what our night sky really looks like through each and every single one of them. For many of us, when we point our telescopes towards the night sky, we expect to see this, but instead see this. So I'm here to set the record straight. I'm going to be showing you raw footage of what our night sky really looks like from telescopes ranging from $50 all the way up to $1 billion. I'm also going to be taking on the most famous space telescope in history from my light-polluted English garden. Is it possible for me to outdo the Hubble Space Telescope? Let's find out. I'm going to be posting daily stargazing videos every day right here, so make sure you're following for the rest of the journey. Thanks for watching and clear skies. So fortunately, I do have the guiding data for all of the AM5N guiding sessions, and as you can see from this graph here, it's a little shaky. The total RMS over a very long period of 40 minutes was 1.53, which, if we're being honest, isn't acceptable. I do test the mount on the Andromeda galaxy again in about 2 hours time, but the results are very similar. To give you some form of a reference point as to what is a good RMS target, here is an example setup of the ASCAR SQA55 and an ASI 533. This is a very wide field setup, and as a result, an RMS of lower than 1.35 would be considered good. But when you're using longer focal length setups with the same camera, your guiding needs to be much more precise, ideally under 1. So now let's see how the bigger mounts get on when pointed at the same target 2 hours later. Now we have the Clearsky ST17 Mini, the EM31 Pro, the Clearsky ST25, and once again the exact same ZWO AM5N mount. This mount is acting as our control mount or our reference mount for both of the tests. The first thing you can probably note is how absurdly long the AM5N was taking to calibrate its guiding once again. The tracking numbers seem to be a bit better across the board, possibly because the Andromeda galaxy was higher in the sky, and possibly because these heavier mounts have the same payloads as the smaller mounts but are dealing with them a lot better. With that being said, notice the regular peaks in the ST17 Mini's data. This periodic error is heavily affecting its score, which is a terrible shame because otherwise it would be competing for the #1 spot. Okay, let's now find out where each telescope ranks in our first round of guiding results. And would you look at that, I suspect this right here is why scientists for centuries have done repeat tests, because the cheapest and least sturdy mount of the bunch has ranked first in the guiding results. Shockingly, the AM5N finishes both last and second last with its 2 attempts. But a well-deserved tip of the hat to the Clearsky ST25 and EM31 Pro as they take up the second and third spots for our first round. Will this prove to be a one-off, or can they keep this up? Let's find out. Right, let's move on to our next target, which is the Heart Nebula. Now, the Heart Nebula isn't that far away from the Andromeda galaxy in our night sky, but it does mean a fresh batch of guiding stars for our mounts to test themselves against. And it looks like the Teseek 11 is setting the record straight with its guiding scores, as it seems to be averaging a total RMS of 1.5. But now the Teseek 17 is crushing it with some insanely low numbers. The Juwei 14 is doing a decent job, and the AM5N has improved slightly on its previous round, but not by much. The really interesting aspect of using the AM5N as our control mount throughout these tests is seeing how it fares at different points of the night. The bigger mounts tests were conducted later on than the small mounts, with the Andromeda galaxy and Heart Nebula being higher in our night sky at this point and thus arguably easier to track. And I think you can definitely make that conclusion by comparing the results from the AM5N over these 2 rounds of guiding, because as you can see the second time around, these are good readings. It's just about keeping up with the other big boys, with the EM31 Pro and Clearsky ST25 noticeably having strong rounds yet again. Where does that leave us in terms of rankings? Well, when looking at the Heart Nebula, it's another win for the Teseek mounts. This time, the Teseek 17 takes the golden medal as the Teseek 11 swaps its gold medal for a red participation ribbon with a total RMS of 1.47. Yeah, that first round of testing seemed a little too good to be true from the Teseek 11. I think we all generally expect the cost of the mount to correspond to its performance, so it feels like things are back to normal now that the cheapest mount is last in our table. I did a bit of a deeper dive on the AM5N's guiding results, particularly its worst set out of these 2 looking at the Heart Nebula, and the odd part is that its results aren't down to a dodgy polar alignment. In fact, its polar alignment is almost spot on. And ironically, out of all of the mounts, the AM5N and EM31 Pro were the only ones I accurately polar aligned. This is because they're the only 2 mounts featured in today's video that don't have a laser pointer inbuilt, which allows me to, very lazily, I might say, polar align the mount. Seriously, the method I use for polar aligning the AM5N is far more precise than this, but it also takes a lot longer than just eyeballing the North Star Polaris with your mount's inbuilt laser. Moving on to our next target, the North American Nebula, I'm expecting better results across the board. This is because this stunning nebula is almost directly overhead at this point of the year and filled with plenty of decently bright stars, making it great for guiding. As you can see from these readings, all of the small mounts are performing very similar to one another, each sitting just below the 1.00 total RMS level, with the Teseek 11 being the only one that really strays above the 1.00 mark. I think this round might belong to the AM5N, which is performing much better. As for the big boys, we are once again seeing some really good results, all producing sub-1 readings for their total RMS, with the AM5N performing almost the exact same as it did with the small mounts, and the Clearsky ST25 having an absolute worldie. And to be fair, the Clearsky ST17 Mini would also be having a very good round if it wasn't for these peaks that keep boosting its total reading numbers. I think there's also something a little bit sus about the right ascension readings for the EM31 Pro here and how it seems to have some quite significant dips, but otherwise it's once again quietly having a good round. So our results for the penultimate round are excellent across the board, with the Teseek 11 the worst performer for the second round in a row, but hey, imagine being the worst performer with an average total RMS of 0.9. I would take that as my mount in a heartbeat. The heaviest mounts cleaned up this round, with the AM5N making its first entry into our top 3, taking home a silver medal, and the ST25 and EM31 Pro making their way onto the podium yet again. And our final target is going to be the Veil Nebula. So let's see how they fare up against this supernova remnant. Okay, let's go out of a bang for our final test by observing an explosive region in our night sky. I'm showing the calibration stage once again because the AM5N is struggling once more. Perhaps someone in the comments can highlight exactly what this might be. I must emphasize that all of the mounts are using the exact same guiding scope, camera, guiding software and imaging settings. I discuss this point further in the extended edition of this video on my new channel, The Telescope Man. Also, if you've enjoyed today's video and want to see more like it, then be sure to like this video, share it, and if you haven't already, subscribe. So in regards to the small mounts, it looks like it's going to be sub 1 guiding results across the board yet again, with the Teseek 11 having another good round and the AM5N finally starting to look like a £2,000 telescope mount. On to the big guys, and I think it's fair to jump to the conclusion that they have overall been better than the smaller mounts, producing much more consistent measurements than their smaller counterparts. It does however really look like the Clearsky ST25 Mini is really struggling to cope even without accounting for its periodic error. The rest of the bunch seem to be producing solid numbers, with the AM5N mount eventually giving readings that are almost identical to its scores in a small mounts test. So it is proving to be consistent. We'll now take a look at the final round of results before then crowning our winner. For the final round, it's the EM31 Pro that takes gold, the Teseek 11 that sneaks into silver, just ahead of the Juwei 14 that claims its very first podium finish of the episode. The less said about the Clearsky ST25 Mini score, the better. So there we have it, our tests have reached their conclusion. There are a lot, and I mean a lot of variables in tests like these. The main reason it's important to conduct the measurements at the exact same time is because even the slightest bit of cloud can affect your readings. It's very difficult to create a fair test, but I think I've done a fairly decent job in this video. I am really keen, however, to hear what your suggestions would be going forward as to how to make them even fairer. I'll try anything short of testing all 7 mounts alongside each other at the same time. Yeah, testing 4 mounts at the same time was already messy enough. I don't want to go through the stress of testing 7 at the same time. Alright, it's time to find out our winner. What is the best pound for pound telescope mount on the market? In 8th place, we have the AM5N with its first set of test results. Grouped in with our smaller mounts, a very underwhelming performance from this titan. Followed by the Clearsky ST25 Mini in 7th place. I think it's clear to identify its faults based on my readings, but even with that being said, an average total RMS of 1.09 for a £599 mount is nothing to be sniffed at. Next up in 6th place is the AM5N again. This time it is its second set of results alongside the big boys. I mean, at least this mount has proven to be consistent. My beloved Juwei 14 mount squeezes in just under 1 RMS and does exactly what it says on the tin. Nothing special, just gets the job done. Its only real points deduction in the grand scheme of things is its lower payload capacity, which at 13 kg with a counterweight is still a very large amount. Hang on a second, look at this guy. The tiniest and lightest of the bunch only just misses out on a medal. Could this mount change the astrophotography landscape going forward, making it more affordable to the masses? Time will tell. Taking home the bronze medal is another Teseek mount. The Teseek 17 offers a lot of potential, particularly at £499 before taxes and shipping. I purchased a cheaper plastic shell version, and as you can see, it's done a really good job with only 2 mounts outperforming it. The first of which is the jack of all trades. The EM31 Pro mount has lived up to its price tag by delivering some excellent results. Whilst initially reviewing this mount, I got the feeling from my communications with the company that they really tried their best to cater towards the astrophotography community and make a mount that works for you. And at 0.73 RMS, I think you can safely say that they have delivered on that. Finally, in first place, our golden medal winner is the absolute tank, the monstrosity, the Clearsky ST25 mount. When I first saw the specifications of this mount saying that it can hold up to 30 kg as its payload, I knew this was a mount that I had to have, but it's the design and additional accessories inbuilt that make it an absolute dream. Before this video, it ticked all of my boxes, but now seeing how well it guides, I mean, it just defies belief. A worthy winner of the title of best pound for pound telescope mount on the market. And if you want help building your dream Astro-rig, then why not try out my brand new Astro-rig builder. It's the first of its kind and allows you to set your budget and pick the exact gear that suits you best. All of the equipment included is stuff that I've already reviewed on my channel and will happily vouch for. This is the first version of my website, so it will only get better from here on out. There are buy now buttons which will take you straight to the item's product page for further inspection, and if you scroll further down you will see a full list of the specifications for your selected gear. It even calculates your field of view with your chosen setup, as well as whether or not your payload exceeds the capabilities of the mount. I've also included a gallery below filled with images that I've captured using the telescopes and cameras featured, to help give you a taste of what to expect. As I'm sure you can imagine, this took a lot of time and effort for me to create from scratch, so please be sure to have fun with it. Hit the randomizer button as many times as you can until you find your dream setup, and share the webpage with any fellow Astro nerds who you think might also appreciate it. Okay, so for the extended edition of this video, I figured I'd go through a lot of the questions about the variables that you have to consider when making a video about telescope mounts like these. So I've wrote some of the ones that came to my head whilst I was editing down here, and I just want to read a few of them out now and elaborate on them and whether or not I considered them beforehand or if it was an afterthought that came to me later on. And I also want to hear your feedback on each of them, and also if you think there's anything else that needs to be controlled when doing tests like this in the future, because I want to make it as fair as physically possible. Okay, so point number 1. Could the big mounts have benefited from testing later on in the night when the targets were higher up, the streetlights had gone off for the final tests of the Heart Nebula and Andromeda Galaxy? So what that means is when the little mounts were guiding, they were pointing at the Andromeda Galaxy, which was about there. But then 2 hours later when the big mounts came to the Andromeda Galaxy, I think it had just gone past the meridian, so it was literally directly overhead. So they had the advantage based on that front, that the target was higher up in the night sky. But also, after midnight here where I live, the vast majority of the streetlights cut out. Therefore, the light pollution levels have also significantly dropped. I mean, it's clear to see from the second set of test results from the AM5N that it did get better throughout the course of the night. So an argument can be made that you need to give a boost to the small mounts with their guiding results. But to be honest, they all came under an average of 1 RMS, so there really isn't that much need for nitpicking in that sense. They all did incredibly well, but I think it's a certainty that if I'd done it later on in the night, they would have done even better. Okay, the ST17 Mini is on a mount and tripod that are not designed to handle it, or is this just periodic error? Now I swear that when I was watching these mounts guide, I could hear a little click sound that was going off at regular periods with the ST17 Mini. Now this could be a number of things. It could just be the periodic error of the motors inside the mount, which is more than plausible, but I actually think that it was succumbing to the fact that the mount head and the tripod legs aren't designed to carry payloads that big. I think the tripod was designed to carry, I want to say 6 kg, and the mount head was designed to carry at most 5, I believe. So just putting the ST17 Mini and the telescope I did on it was enough to push it over the edge. Point there is that I don't think I did the ST17 Mini justice by putting it on such a fragile setup. I should have tried a bit harder to mount it on something that was more sturdy. Funnily enough, when I first tested it for the very first time, I actually had it mounted on the EM31 Pro, where I literally just slid the dovetail of the mount into this, which was already polar aligned towards Polaris, and it worked like a treat. So maybe should have done that. All mounts are brand new. The EM31 Pro is the only one that I've had for longer than 3 months, and the only one that was sent to me by the company itself. The AM5N is not sent via ZWO, it was purchased from a retailer for full price. I did get sent a ZWO AM5N to do a review on, but the one that you saw in the video is actually a brand new one that I bought separately. So this ensures that it's not cherry-picked by ZWO, because if you're a company sending out your products to be reviewed by big creators who are going to have an influence on what a lot of the core audience for your product is going to think about the product, you're going to want to send them the best model of your product possible. You'll notice with a lot of these larger mounts they come with test reports, so I think it's well within these companies' interest to send creators like myself very good version of the mount. Like most things in life, the quality of the product does vary. They're not all the exact same level, so I think it would be in a company's best interest to send the creators the better variations of these models, simply because they're going to have the biggest influence towards the buyers on whether or not they should buy the product. But you can rule that out here for all of them except for the EM31 Pro, because I bought them all under an alias which no one could associate with my actual name or my channels. So I think that's made it a very fair test in that regard. The ZWO AM5N mount is rapid, and of course it is the most well known out of all of them. If something was to go wrong with your product, then I have no doubt with M can that if there was an issue with it, they would do everything in their power to assist me with it. The communications I've received from them have been top notch. With the AM5N mount being a ZWO mount and them being such a global powerhouse in the telescope industry, they would also be there to assist you. This mount just left to me here is the Clearsky ST25. I don't know much about Clearsky, but they do have a web page and a store where you can go and buy the mount from, so I assume that if something goes wrong, you can still contact them. I say that because the rest of the mounts don't really have any recognized notable company that is selling their product. So if something's to go wrong, there doesn't seem to be an immediate failsafe of someone who you can go point the finger to and say, this is your fault, fix this, which will put a lot of people off. Whenever people seem to have these issues from mounts they've bought from AliExpress, they generally just message the seller, and the seller gets back to them fairly quickly and gives them a step-by-step solution to what's gone wrong. Yeah, I've actually never had to return anything to AliExpress. Everything's turned out absolutely fine. And of course, I don't want to tempt fate and risk the chance of something going wrong in the near future and me having to rely on contacting the seller to get a resolution. But I don't know, I feel like it wouldn't be the end of the world. I don't think I'd be on my own. If something went wrong, I don't think I'd be screwed and there'd be no way around it. I'd just have to figure it out for myself. I do think there'd be a way for me to communicate with people that know what they're doing and find a solution to my problem. Yeah, as for the AM5N rapid comment, it slews at about 6 degrees per second, I believe, whereas most of the others slew at a max of 2.4 degrees per second. And I think if I'm remembering correctly, I mean, it might be this one here, the Clearsky, it seems to go at like 4 times slower speed than what the AM5N was going. I know I was slewing them towards their targets one by one in order by pressing on the tablets, and even though the AM5N was the last one out the list, it was more often than not the first one to reach the target still. I think in the grand scheme of things in astrophotography, we image targets for very long periods of times, most often or not for hours at a time. So saving 30 seconds on slewing to an object might not seem like that big of a deal, but with that being said, I just thought it was really cool how quickly the AM5N managed to swing about and point to different targets. Yeah, just something worth mentioning. And the thing is, seeing this slew on its own didn't seem like there was anything wrong, but then seeing it side by side with that, it's like, why is it so slow? Right, in terms of the guiding gear, I bought 4 of the exact same model 50mm guiding scopes from the same supplier, and when I received them, I could tell straight away that they all looked the exact same. They were identical across the board. So I don't think you can question the quality of the optics too much in terms of, is it a fair test? Did different setups have different quality guide scopes? Where there is a slight room for error is the focus achieved with the guide cameras, the ASI 120 monochrome cameras. I did achieve focus with all of them, but I'm not sure I got the sharpest possible focus there was to obtain, so that could potentially be a little bit better. In order to control the guiding, I used 2 ASI Air Pluses and 2 ASI Air Minis, and the Minis for some frustrating reason didn't record the guiding logs, which is why I had to do the very long-winded method of writing a script to then analyze the frame-by-frame screen recording of what the total RMS was and then determine an average. But one other thing that I noticed about the guiding was that for some reason the majority of them did multi-star guiding, and that's where like you sort of pick one main star but then you also have others and go off the group movement, which I think is a better way of tracking. But I couldn't find a way to turn that on or off when looking at the ASI Air configurations. There was no way for me to single that out. So you might notice on 1, maybe 2 of them, all of them are multi-star guiding bar 1. Again, I don't think that heavily influenced it too much, but just a point to note. Yeah, and I think the last point I'll touch on is that I tried to spend the vast majority of the time sat firmly planted in my chair by the table away from the mount so I wouldn't disrupt them too much. But there was one huge incident, and that was where I had the big tablet that you can see on the right hand side of the screen here, and that was propped up by a Pepsi can, which yep, it's over here. It is heavily dented, but fortunately still hasn't exploded. If you think I'm moving really slowly right now, it's because this telescope right here is of course imaging and I don't want to vibrate it too much, but it's fairly solid with its stature. Right, so this was propping the tablet up and it just slipped out, fell, dropped onto the floor here and then rolled on towards the grass behind me, and then it somehow moved a couple feet over there later in life. That might affect the results. But look at the guiding measurements for when this fell off. You'll notice that two mounts severely changed their guiding rates just because this fell off a 3-foot high table. Yeah, that's absolutely crazy, the spikes that this falling off caused. So it really is a delicate test, and as I mentioned earlier on, when we used to do our lab sessions at university, we had to find all the tiny little discrepancies and small variables that could affect our measurements, so much so as a student walking past causing a gust of breeze that might affect the test we were doing. That is very much the same case here, where even the dog coming out sprinting to the back of the garden to go bark at one of the cats, if he comes too close to one of these mounts, it offsets the mount slightly and affects the guiding results, and therefore it's not a fair test. So I hope you appreciate how incredibly precise and delicate these tests have to be in order for it to be fair. Yeah, there is one major thing that I still haven't mentioned, and that is the fairy lights and how they'll affect the guiding scopes and quality of the guiding sessions, but I think this increases the level of light pollution, and for me that makes it a more relatable test to those of you back home. I suppose to get the fairest test possible you want to go to an empty desert where you have crystal clear skies, but this is more of a real world test, what I've done here. So yeah, there we go. Thank you very much for tuning in for the extended edition of this video. If you do have any questions whatsoever about the tests or the results, let me know in the comments down below and I'll reply to them as quickly as I possibly can. I'll definitely do it on this channel because with this being a new channel, there's going to be less comments and therefore it's easier for me to reply to, as opposed to my main channel where for some reason YouTube has just started hiding the vast majority of the comments from me, which is really frustrating. So yeah, thank you very much for watching. All of the links to the telescope mounts are in the description down below. I am the Telescope Man, and this was astronomical? Nope, no, I'm the Telescope Man. Thanks for watching, and clear skies. Let me know what you thought of today's telescope mounts in the comments down below, and if you own any of these yourself, then please share your own personal experience for the rest of us astrophotographers to read and discuss. Yeah, the more hands-on reviews we get of these unknown telescope mounts that are very cheap, the better, because then more of us can feel confident in purchasing them and getting into the hobby for a much cheaper cost. I've been saying for a couple of years now that strain wave mounts are the best thing to happen to astrophotography in the last decade or so, and that's because they make it so much easier without having to lug around counterweights and sorts. They're incredibly small and lightweight, and if we only have to pay £299 for them, even better. Thanks for watching. I'm Damon Scotting, and this was Astronomical. Don't forget to check out my new channel, The Telescope Man, and if you want to purchase any of the mounts from today's video, then you can click on the links featured in the description down below. Cheers!